Do you know they surprised me? I didn't even know Emory was showing up for this. I love it. It's so cool. Good morning. Our opening hymn is, actually, our opening responsive reading can be found at 521 in our hymnals. And I'll wait as you find that. All right. It's so good. The door to the sanctuary is open, and people are just coming in, and it's like warm out at last. It's so good. All right. 521. May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides. May I wish for every person's happiness and envy no one. May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me. May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want. May I never fail a friend. May I respect myself. May I always keep tame that which rages within me. May I accustom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstance. May I know good people and follow in their footsteps. And we will sing our opening hymn is number 66, When the Summer Sun is Shining, because it is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome on this beautiful sunny day to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where people have been gathering for centuries to find a better way and a better truth together. We are glad for you who are joining on Zoom and all who are here in our sanctuary. And we are glad that you've come on this holiday weekend and on this weekend when we remember the heavy cost of war and those who have lost their lives to it. We have a few upcoming events, though things are indeed starting to wrap up and slow down a bit for the summer. We have a memorial service here on Friday afternoon for Daisy Illich at 1 p.m. So any who knew her or would like to learn more about who she was are very welcome to attend. This coming Sunday, next Sunday, June 4th, we're having our senior youth group close of year party so that we can go to the Pride event together on June 11th. And speaking of June 11th, that is a day of many happenings, because not only will we have our flower communion service and a really beautiful celebration of our church year, but we'll have our annual meeting, and then after that there will be the Pride event on the Common that is being run by the Bedford Embraces Diversity and other local groups that was started last year by some Girl Scouts, I do believe, including from our congregation. So a lovely event to come and be present at and celebrate in a time when we need to be doing that more than ever. And with that, I'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in our unison affirmation in your order of worship. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. You may be seated. Our time for all ages today comes from Erica Hewitt and Paul S. Sawyer. Think of a time when you feel safe and at peace. Are there any specific signals that tell you it's time to be at peace, that this is a safe time? Does anybody have thoughts on what signals that to you? When it's quiet, I like that. When cats are purring, that's a good one. We like animal sounds, quiet and good animal sounds. That helps. That's good. Well, in the United States military, there is a special signal that says it's time to be safe and at peace. And it's a melody called taps. It's only 24 notes long, and it was composed by a bugler and a general in the Civil War. Back during the Civil War, bugle calls were the way to communicate across long distances. There weren't other methods of communication developed yet to communicate between different components of an army on a battlefield. And so bugle calls were incredibly important. And the end of the day was very important as well. And if there was time and if there was enough peace to play taps, that signaled to the soldiers that it was safe to rest. Unless you were on one of the watches, unless you were on duty, you could rest in peace knowing that there weren't enemy soldiers nearby. And they say that the first time that taps was played at a memorial service, at a service for a fallen soldier, was also in the Civil War. And they say it took place during a time when there was a ceasefire. Now, you might know that the traditional military salute is and was a 3-round volley of rifles. But there was concern that to do the military salute during this ceasefire at this funeral would be causing stress, anxiety, even perhaps outbreaks of fighting. And they didn't want to use that. And so they decided instead to play the bugle call. And so that too became a tradition, a sacred memorial, and a kind of prayer for peace and quiet and rest. And so we're going to listen to taps now. Or we're So we remember this tune, and we can use it as a call to make there be more peace and rest in this world than war, a time where there can be more cooperation than violence, a time when nobody will have to hear this sound and mean that this is the only time you can be safe, but to create a world where all can be safe and all can be well.
We have a prayer this morning that was written by Barbara J. Peskin. And I invite you to join me as you are comfortable in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names, in thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, no more, never again, remember me. For the wounded ones and those who receive them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create peace. Amen. Each week in church, we take an offering. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from generosity and hard work. And we are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and for our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and good works of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope this morning. Thank you, Steve. Yesterday was a day filled with sunlight and geraniums and a chicken who is no more. A fast-driving car down our wooded country road hit our pet in the road. You are perhaps now trying to think of a gentle joke about why she was crossing the road. She liked the soft earth under a pine across the street, but at that particular moment, she was headed home to roost. She lived a very happy, full life to the very moment when she died. I heard the accident and I knew that she was not long for this world. To end her suffering, I helped her die, humanely, but with great regret. Jesse named her Monkey Wrench. He named all our chickens Tools. We have a caliper and a spoon, because when he was 2, a spoon was a tool. I guess it is. What hurt most as I held her and stroked her body was watching my 4-year-old Jessie make sense of her death. "Will she eat?" he asked. This was her favorite thing to do. "No, she has died." "Will she play?" His favorite thing to do. "No, her heart has stopped and she isn't alive anymore." And his little face twisted as he tried to make sense of this, and it ripped my heart. But death is natural. It is just a part of living. This we know. When a fox fed her young with another of our chickens last year, I was sad, but it made sense, and it did not feel unnatural to me. Jessie came to understand that one life ended so another could go on. Death isn't wrong or bad. It's simply an end. But it is so very hard to stomach when it is unnecessary or cruel or callous. The man who hit our bird just kept driving without stopping to see what he'd done or express his own shock or perhaps voice an apology. Jessie would have understood a mistake, terrible as it was, but without an expression of compassion. It all seemed senseless. I admit that my mind right away wondered if the driver had sped up and aimed for her on purpose. That's where my mind went, and I don't know why, but it did. After Jessie fell asleep, I dug around on my bookshelf for a children's book, I meant to bring it, called Death is Stupid. It's a work of art, really. It's a book made out of collages, and it helps kids and adults as well think and feel their way through complicated feelings about death. Acceptance of one's own feelings is the heart of it, and among other things, it respects that death can feel so dumb and so unnecessary. War feels that way to me, even though, of course, it's far more complicated than simply death and dying. I held my beautiful orange bird, the same one I once held in my hand as a 5-day-old chick, and I needed that book, Death is Stupid, for myself. Life is so beautiful and so fleeting. How could we ever forget? When I was about 4, my parents took me to a reenactment of the Battle of Bunker Hill. We sat in seats in a darkened room, and a little window lit up frame by frame, one at a time, on the wall, and a soundtrack talked about the drama. It was neat to see tiny houses and sheep grazing on the fields, but imagine my horror when little people the size of matchsticks picked up their guns, and suddenly, with a bang, somebody's head was blown off. The scene went red and then dark, and I couldn't breathe. I had never seen or heard of war, or guns, or death until that very moment. It was an awakening for me, and I know now that it helped me form the inner realities of my world, and I think it perhaps later shaped the sense of a call to ministry. Connections are made so slowly, sometimes they grow underground. Humans can be this way to one another in the world, I realized. They can kill and hate, or not hate and kill. Must it be so, I asked. I refused then and now to believe that. I'd like to pause for a moment and ask Annie to come and share a responsive reading that influenced writing this sermon.
I would love for you to turn to number 568 in your hymnals. It's Connections Are Made Slowly by Marge Piercy, one of my favorites. I'll read the regular text and you can read the italics. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen. This is how we are going to live. For a long time, not always.
I shared all this about my little chicken dying in front of my little child, and this memory I have about the Battle of Bunker Hill because I want to be open with you about my feelings about war. In high school, I had a favorite teacher who went off to the Korean War with 7 friends, and he was the only one who returned. In his class, we read All Quiet on the Western Front, Johnny Got His Gun, Slaughterhouse 5, and the things they carried. I was shaped by anti-war novels, but more so I was shaped by the way that this man once held my hands in his own when I was in deep pain. He wanted me to live. He wanted humans to stay alive. And that's why he ended up teaching a curriculum of anti-war. He taught us that many wars were fought with the ultimate goal of saving lives. But his eyes sprang tears when he talked like that. He too held out hope for humankind. Gnaw in the dark, our responsive reading said, and use the sun to make sugar. Do anything you can to prevent the atrocities of war. Like so many of you, of course, my own relatives served in the armed forces. They were proud to serve and proud of our country. And I am glad that Memorial Day exists when we take the time to remember our fallen soldiers, honor them for their service, and pay our respects to the families who are left behind. Memorial Day requires humility because we are the living. I remember one year asking on Memorial Day, it might have been Veterans Day, one of them. And I'll say again that Memorial Day remembers those who have died, and Veterans Day remembers those who served. And so I ask you, if you're comfortable, to raise your hand if you are someone who served or have a family member who served in our military, in any of our, and it is most of the room. It is most, I see, most of the room. So we sit here together knowing that. Before we go further, let's give credit where it's due. Before this year, I did not know the story of how Memorial Day celebrations began. You may know, but I did not, that it originated with freed slaves. In the spring of 1865, towards the end of the American Civil War, Charleston, South Carolina, was under Union occupation. The city had been a key Confederate stronghold, and it was where the first shots of the war were fired at Fort Sumter. During the war, many enslaved people were forced to work in labor camps and as servants for the Confederate Army. As the war drew to a close and Confederate armies surrendered, Charleston's enslaved population, who had been freed by the advancing Union troops, sought to honor and commemorate the fallen Union soldiers who had been buried in a makeshift prisoner of war camp. They recognized the importance of proper burial and remembrance for these soldiers, understanding that their memory was deeply intertwined with their own liberation. It's said that around May 1st, 1865, a gathering of approximately 10,000 freed slaves, accompanied by white missionaries and teachers, took place at the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club in Charleston. This site had served as a prison camp for captured Union soldiers, many of whom had died due to harsh conditions and disease. The freed slaves exhumed the bodies of the Union soldiers from mass graves and reinterred them in individual graves. They constructed a fence around the burial site and erected an archway entrance with the inscription, "Martyrs of the Race Course." Following the burials, they organized a parade to honor the memory of the soldiers. The procession involved thousands of participants who marched in solemn remembrance, singing hymns, reciting prayers, and carrying flowers. They adorned the graves with flowers, creating a powerful display of gratitude and respect. For a number of years around that time, that annual ritual was called Decoration Day. Then, following the First World War, the holiday was expanded to acknowledge the ultimate sacrifice of soldiers in all wars. In 1971, it became an official federal holiday known as Memorial Day, honoring all Americans who have died in military service. The holiday lost its original meaning as a celebration of freedom for the former slaves, but we should hold on to the original context. None of us are free when others are oppressed, Martin Luther King famously said. He wouldn't have said that war is an answer, but many people saw no other way to end slavery or the economic collapse of the time as it was. War is that complex almost always, and the cost is the lives of so many brave or terrified souls among us. We may not agree about the means to a greater end, but most of us, as Unitarian Universalists, believe that we can live most fully into the legacy of freedom and justice by working for a lasting peace within our own nation and among nations. In her book, titled Instructions in Joy, Nancy Schaefer shares this meditation. Because we spill not only milk, knocking it over with an elbow when we reach to wipe a small face, but also spill seed on soil we thought was fertile but isn't. and also spill whole lives, and only later see in fading light how much is gone and we hadn't intended it. Because we tear not only cloth, thinking to find a true edge, and instead making only a hole, but also tear friendships when we grow, and whole mountainsides, because we are so many and want to live right where black oaks lived once, very quietly and still. Because we forget not only what we are doing in the kitchen and have to go back to the room we were in before, remember why it was we left, but also forget entire lexicons of joy and how we lost ourselves for hours, yet all that time were clearly found and held. And also forget the hungry not at our table, because we weep not only at jade plants caught in freeze and precious papers left in rain, but also at legs that no longer walk. And also weep at words said once as though they might be rearranged, but which, once loose, refuse to return, and we are helpless because we are imperfect and love so deeply we will never have enough days. We need the gift of starting over, beginning again. Just this constant good, this saving hope. Connections are made slowly, our poem says. Sometimes they go underground like a tree spread out in the soil underneath your feet. What we have learned in our lifetimes about pain and loss and war and peace has become a good teacher for our own compassion. And isn't compassion the sister to hope? Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in. This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always. Our late parishioner, Daisy Illich, who died 2 weeks ago at age 97, was someone who reached out for connection across all sorts of divides. She was in a small group I used to lead at Carlton Willard Village, and that Annie now leads, and she was in that too for some time. She always had an opinion, Daisy that is. I mean, Annie probably does too. Daisy just always had something to say, and she also almost always had something to contribute when someone was trying to make sense of the world. There's a story about her giving her beloved and well-used sewing machine to John Gibbons to take to the people of Abashvalva, Transylvania, where our partner church is. Daisy said she knew that they would use the machine and that it would help them in their farming community. John recalls that when the 40-pound machine tumbled out of his luggage, the room of elder women was just astounded and then leapt upon it. And I hear that it is still in use today. Daisy's daughter, Yvonne, writes, Daisy knew that if you had just the right tools and knew how to use them, you could get through a lot of difficulties. And giving the sewing machine was a gesture, woman to women, to remember our caregiving and providing for each other, and to preserve what we have and to make things out of next to nothing, even if just a piece of cloth to sew something for a baby or a babushka for an elder. When she had nothing, she always gave of herself, either sharing what she had like a true survivor of the Holocaust that she was, or just listening. Once, when a family across the street lost their son in Vietnam, everyone stayed away, not knowing what to say, and Daisy just walked into their house when she could see the woman crying on the couch through her window, and she comforted her. She had never met this woman before, just had heard from the other women in the community that it had happened, and saw the uniformed officers showing up to deliver the news. She had witnessed that so many times before in England and early in Austria, and she did the kindest thing she could think of. She reached out, she went, and she sat still beside someone in pain. Life is so beautiful and so fleeting. Live a life you can endure, our poet says. Make love that is loving, the poet says. Reach out and keep reaching out, keep bringing in. Seek meaning not in our own suffering, but in our shared experience of the human condition. Things change, we change. Our lives never stand still. There is always something new. We are always making transitions from one thing to another, one experience to another, one stage of life to another, one challenge to another. As we reflect this Memorial Day on all that has been sacrificed, lost, and gained in our efforts for justice and peace, may we hold on to our memories of one another, hold on to our convictions and to our faith in the future. In our journey of holding on and letting go, may we accept and forgive ourselves and one another. We are always, always learning. Nancy Wood's words, hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. I love you always. Amen. We will sing number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. May the light around us guide our footsteps and hold us fast to the best and most righteous that we seek. May the darkness around us nurture our dreams and give us rest so that we may give ourselves to the work of our world. Let us seek to remember the wholeness of our lives, the weaving of light and shadow in this great and astonishing dance in which we move. Amen.